And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Today, we're doing a preview of the first half of the bills that LCAG and the State of Freedom will be following very closely. There's a lot here. It's going to be jam-packed, but let me read the scripture of the day to get us started. It is Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. And it says, "Are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Come to me. I will refresh your life, for I am your oasis. Simply join your life with mine. Learn my ways, and you'll discover that I'm gentle, humble, easy to please. You will find refreshment and rest in me. For all that I require of you will be pleasant and easy to bear." And this passage reminds us that Jesus is our source of life and refreshing. Like an oasis, he appears in the dry places of our lives. When we're weary and we think we can't go on, he's there. He provides shade from the heat that we face in our lives. He provides refreshing that we can't access any other way. He's kind and gentle. And what he asks from us is partnership, that we attach our lives to him. He wants us to live with the obedience of loving children and to move forward in the assignments he's given us.
And it is so true, Danielle, that he is meek and humble of heart. But it's, for me personally, it's been difficult. At times, it is difficult to really surrender to the foot of the cross and to accept that he's meek and humble of heart, because I doubt my worthiness. I doubt my own value. I doubt whether or not I really deserve that type of unconditional love. And I wonder whether or not it's really a reality for me sometimes. And I know that it is intellectually, but converting that to a gut level, psychically and emotionally, it's very, very difficult to comprehend that someone could love me that much. And coming to that realization and accepting that is itself an act of grace. But I think when I am able to do that, it truly does lift the burdens, and it truly does. It's extraordinarily liberating. And quite frankly, you've helped me along the way to be able to do that. And so I thank you for that.
Well, you're most welcome. I think it's so important, Chris, that we just remind ourselves and continue the practice of telling ourselves and saying out loud and telling the enemy when necessary who the Lord says we are. And because we know that he is truth. And so anything that doesn't match up with the standard of truth is under the influence of a lie. And I absolutely believe that. And we need to live in that reality and strive to that reality of just continually renewing our minds until that becomes our reality.
Yeah, because he will, the devil will scoot in any possible way he can. He'll come in through the crack in the door, the smallest crack he'll try to get in, which is what you were telling me the other day, the importance of putting on the full armor of God and sort of making ourselves impenetrable to the devil, and if we do that, then we're going to be good. And I hope and believe, Danielle, that we will be impenetrable to all the wiles of Satan when this legislative session starts very, very shortly. And God knows we will need it in that place down there, won't we?
We will. We certainly will.
Yeah, But anyway, a number of bills, certainly not all, but a number of bills that we've looked at and that we are going to call our listeners' attention to tonight, and probably do a good number of calls to action on these bills, because there are quite a few very good ones in here.
Yeah, Chris, as we have started looking at these, and you have spent a lot more time in the weeds on this than I have, but there were a remarkable number of bills pre-filed, 1,100 to be precise, right around 1,100. And that is an extraordinary amount to comb through, especially with one legal brain on board. But it really, Chris, it really burns me up that there's so much legislation, because as I recall, God gave us the 10 commandments. That was 10 laws. Pretty simple. And then Jesus boiled it down even further than that to 2. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So all of the laws and the prophets are summed up in these 2 commandments. So what business does the state of Louisiana have to bring forward a minimum, because the session hasn't even started yet, of 1,100 proposed laws to shove through in 3 months' time?
Yeah, it's really, really astounding, Danielle. Especially when you think about the fact that our legislature is the servant of the citizens. How can you expect citizens, even citizens who are very active like we are, to be able to really understand and know the contents of 1,100 articles of legislation that may directly affect us? There's just no possible way.
How about the legislators? Do you think the legislators can keep up with it?
Many of our legislators don't understand what they're voting on. Unfortunately, some of them do. Some of them are very conscientious, but some of them really don't know what they're voting on. But the bottom line is, we have dedicated ourselves to making sure that every bit of legislation that goes through that House, we're at least somewhat familiar with. We cannot address all of it, at least not yet, but we will absolutely address the most important items of legislation, some of which, not all, as I said, but some of which we're going to be talking about right here tonight, right now.
Yes. And today as you said, Chris, we've really had to prioritize our focus. Of course, I think, we have 22 bills on the list that we will be covering, that will be laser focused on as of today, right? I'm sure more will be brought to our attention that we'll want to weigh in on in some form or fashion. And today we will cover half of those, so 11 bills. But maybe I'll just take this opportunity, Chris, and ask the listeners that if there are bills that you are very passionate about, either ones that we mention on the show or ones that you find out about elsewhere, please make a plan and a personal commitment to get to the Capitol and participate. Come and testify. If you're too shy to testify, come anyway and fill out a red card or a green card and make your support or opposition known. It makes a huge difference. It absolutely makes a difference. Chris, I'll never forget what Senator Facey told us about the first time he brought the bill to ban transgender treatments for minors. He said that he holds the record for the most opposed bill of all time, because over 900 pro-child trans activists showed up to oppose his bill, and not one single person showed up to support the legislation. So it absolutely makes a difference. And you know what? This is a new day in the legislature and a new day in Baton Rouge, because people are fed up with the propaganda, fed up with government overreach, and they are making their voices heard. So hear my cry, make your voice heard as well.
Absolutely. It's so important to have people to come down to the Capitol. We have a good group of LCAG members who do come to the Capitol. But as you said, Danielle, anybody who is, shy about testifying in front of legislative committees, that's certainly understandable. The biggest fear, from what I understand, the biggest universal fear in human nature is the fear of public speaking. I think that's still number one on the list. So I certainly understand that, but you can make your voice heard in other ways. As you said, you can come and fill out a red card to oppose or a green card to support, and we will be there. Come find me. and we will make you feel, safe and protected, and speak on any bill that you are concerned about and talk to you about it. So we encourage that very, very much. But there are many things that you can do to get involved. But we are going to be there next week, and we're going to be down there probably testifying, Danielle, on a number of these items of legislation that we're going to talk about tonight. And you're right, Danielle, this is 22, well, this is 11 that we'll talk about today, but we have a number of others we'll talk about in the future. We could end up talking about 80 or 100, and I could end up testifying 40 or 50 times down at the legislature this session. We'll just see where it goes. Being a German shepherd, being a LeCag German shepherd for the citizens of Louisiana does not come without a cost, but it's a cost I am willing to bear.
Well, Chris, let's get into it. First up, let's cover a couple pieces of legislation related to COVID and health related to COVID. So the first bill up is House Bill 312, being brought by Representative Chuck Owen. It is to get ivermectin over the counter. And I believe he told us that Tennessee has similar legislation.
What a great bill, Danielle. I'm so glad that you decided to start the show with this bill. Ivermectin was called horse paste by the left and by the liberals, who were afraid that it would be prescribed by doctors and essentially shut down the entire COVID epidemic before they could, fully realize their scam and their racket. And it was criticized, called horse paste. I'll never forget Joe Rogan was criticized for endorsing ivermectin. It is very, very broadly accepted as a medication for all kinds of things. And this will allow people to buy it over the counter right here in Louisiana. No doctor prescription. Thank God for Chuck Owen. And, I'm certainly hopeful that this will pass, and it needs to pass.
It does. I'm very excited about that one. And, as the listeners often probably do know, many of them know from last session, my parents are pharmacists, and they are very excited to see this come to fruition as well, because it's been out of the reach for a lot of patients, and a lot of doctors won't write it. So, people have gone down to the Tractor Supply. So this makes it, and I'm not, look, there are studies that have been done, Chris, that have shown that it's almost impossible to overdose on ivermectin. There's no documented cases of anyone ever having overdosed on ivermectin. So not to say, people should absolutely be careful if they're going to the Tractor Supply. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying this would be a much easier, cleaner dosing process than figuring it out. But people are very capable. So I don't, want to limit people in any way.
I have to ask you something before we move on.
Sure.
Danielle, what do you think would have been how would the trajectory of the COVID-19 pandemic have been different if ivermectin had been broadly accessible and broadly prescribed early on?
It would not have happened the way that it did. I think, the pandemic, in my view, is a tragedy that's got so many level tragedy, but doctors withholding treatments that they know will work or that are proven to work that they can learn about is just beyond the pale for me. When I got COVID December 2020, between 2020 and 2021, right there in Christmas, New Year time, and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. That was the first round of, the first wave of COVID. And I had access to ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine because I had great functional doctors who were willing to prescribe that. And I just thought that the fact that people would withhold specifically hydroxychloroquine from elderly patients, from people who are suffering from comorbidities, that they would put them on a ventilator instead of easing their suffering. When I tell you my pain went down from probably a 12 on the pain chart, I thought I'd been hit by a truck, down to 3 within probably 4 hours. It was just amazing. And I'm, relatively young, pretty fit person. So for people who are suffering from any kind of chronic pain or ailments, to have that withheld from them just because of the powers that be is just beyond the pale.
It is beyond the pale, Danielle, and I know we're spending a little bit of time on this, but but it's not like the CDC, it's not like the National Institute of Health, it's not like the Health Organization did not know that ivermectin was effective. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. established meticulously with exhaustive research in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, that ivermectin was broadly used in not just, throughout the world, and was, an extraordinarily popular and safe medication. And yet doctors are not prescribing it generally because they're afraid of retaliation from their medical boards. They're afraid of being, losing their medical licenses, afraid of being for all kinds of things. So,
and pharmacies won't fill it. That's been a real thing as well. There's only a limited number of pharmacies, mostly small independent pharmacies, that are actually even willing to fill the prescription, which is a real shame.
Why do you think it is, Danielle? Why do you think it is that the United States health agencies were so adamant about not prescribing ivermectin? What was the problem?
Well, I think that CVS and Walgreens and big brands like that are pretty woke to start with. And then they probably were bullied into submission. They probably stand a lot to gain. I don't know about Walgreens, but CVS has its own PBM. So they negotiate with the drug companies for big contracts. I don't know. They all administer vaccines on site. So who knows what the real reason was? I think a lot of people in that industry in the high up positions know each other, work together in different companies. You've seen that the FDA is a revolving door of pharma executives. So I think all of that comes into play.
Yeah.
There's probably coercion and bullying as well. I'm not saying that everybody wanted to do that, but everybody sure did bow the knee.
Yeah, well, certainly, if you take ivermectin and you get better in 4 to 6 hours, it certainly seems to create a disincentive to get an experimental vaccine that is making these pharmaceutical companies multi-billionaires. So, yeah, I can certainly understand that. But anyway, thank God for Chuck Owen, and we're gonna push this one over the line for sure.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that one. And then next up is House Bill 47 being brought by Representative Kathy Edmonston. It requires that communications about vaccine requirements to students or prospective students include exemption information. And Chris, this was just a rule that was just passed at the Bessie board meeting that we were pretty heavy in getting calls to action out on just last week.
Yes, indeed. A lot of calls to action went out from LeCag. Moms for Liberty, Paige Lowry was very much involved in this. Brandy Poe. But yes, Bessie just passed a rule which says that anytime any school sends out or school boards send out information about vaccine requirements, they have to include the right of exemption so that parents can always know you have the right to exempt from a vaccine. This legislation is basically codifying, as you said, Danielle, what Bessie just did. This is incidentally the third or the fourth time that Representative Edmondson has brought this legislation. Most recently in 2023, you recall, it was vetoed by the governor, and then the veto was not able to be overridden. And so it failed, but it did pass in 2023. Well, hopefully this time with our new governor, that's going to go through and be signed. So it's very important.
I hope we see a lot of signatures flying pretty quickly, Chris. I think we can see some stuff signed into law in the first 3 weeks, first month. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And think about it. If you had told me 50 years ago or 100 years ago, or that American citizens would not be told by people who were giving them information about vaccines that they have a right, first of all, to full informed consent, and secondly, that they have a right to opt out of it if they choose, I would have said you're crazy.
Yeah.
Of course they're gonna know that, but we live in a different world now that we even have to codify and force the government to provide this information. It's unfortunate.
It is. And Representative Edmonston's also bringing another bill up, House Bill 46, related to this one. And this one was also brought several times. I think it passed at least once, both houses, and it was prohibiting the COVID shot as a requirement, the requirement of a COVID shot as a condition to enter a public or private school in Louisiana. We're going to get it through this time, Kathy.
We are absolutely going to get it through, and nobody will ever be forced to show proof that they took a COVID shot to enter a private or a public school in Louisiana ever again once this is signed. I admire Representative Edmonston's tenacity. This is the second or third time that this one has been brought. And, three's a charm, Danielle.
Yeah. Well, I think having good people in office is a charm. So we're thankful for that. All right. The last one up in this section is Senate Bill 357 by Senator Seabaugh, and it will allow the majority of either chamber to terminate an emergency order by petition, and it eliminates quote unquote public health authority consultation requirement that's currently spelled out in the law.
Yeah, Governor Edwards did everything within his power and opposed every effort to lift his draconian emergency decrees, even after it became well established that COVID did not pose nearly the risk that everybody thought. He continued to try to jockey people to get this experimental vaccine, including even doing a lottery to try to get people to get the vaccine,
Shameful.
if you recall.
Absolutely
yes,
shameful.
Unbelievable, and continue to try to shut us down. Alan Seabaugh circulated a petition at that time, and there was controversy about whether or not it required both houses, whether or not you could shut down, whether or not you could terminate just part of an emergency decree and keep the other in place. Well, this bill clarifies it. SB 357. It says, as you said, Danielle, that a majority of either chamber, either the House or the Senate, can terminate all or just part of an emergency health decree. So you don't have to terminate the whole thing. You can terminate part of it because sometimes some of it may be good. And then also, it eliminates the requirement that the legislature has to consult with the Louisiana Department of Health that has gotten absolutely nothing right when it comes to the COVID vaccine or the pandemic. Everything they have said has been statistically questionable or downright wrong. And yet the legislature has to consult with them before they can circulate a petition and get a majority vote to terminate an emergency health decree. Well, this legislation will eliminate that requirement of having to consult with the LDH. So it's a good, clean bill, and it will be one of many things that will help our state from having to be closed down and locked down in the future if we get another governor like John Bel Edwards.
Yes. And Chris, this raises a question for me. I'm catching you off guard, but in terms of emergency authority of the governor, what balance of power authority does the legislature have to undo or to revoke an emergency order that the legislature disagrees with or thinks may be out of line?
Well, under this legislation, they have the authority at any time, if they can get a majority vote, to vacate any emergency decree.
So it's not just related to health, but for the health part, if it's a health bill or a health emergency decree, it kicks out the LDH part as well.
It kicks out the LDH part.
That's beautiful. Very elegant, Senator Seabaugh.
Senator Seabaugh, but any emergency order, the legislature can do that, and it's so we're very excited about it, and it's going to clarify. It's going to clarify this issue.
Perfect. We need that, and I think it's important that the legislature claws back some balance of power from the governor's office. So I hope this passes. I think it will. I don't see really a problem in it passing, but I hope the governor sees the long-term benefits of this as well.
And me too. And by the way, there is a statute in Louisiana that gives the governor certain emergency powers for a limited period of time, but they're very narrowly tailored, and they do not include anywhere a suspension of fundamental constitutional rights or locking down citizens or depriving citizens of their fundamental right to worship in their chosen chosen houses of worship. It doesn't allow that. Everything that he did was an abuse of his constitutional authority. Everything that he did, and his statutory authority. And this legislation is preemptively going to make sure that if we ever get someone else like that in office, we're going to be able to shut it down quickly.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. That leads us to the next topic, Chris, which is on state sovereignty. And there's some pretty good bills. I'm excited about these bills. 2 out of the 3 are fresh, I believe. 1 out of the 3 is fresh, but we're excited about all of them and hope that they all pass. The first one is Senate Bill 133, being brought by Senators Presley and Hodges. And it is saying that there is no jurisdiction for international organizations like the WHO in Louisiana. Chris, just a comment from me on this is that I love that they're going for this with a full-throated approach. It's not a resolution, it's a law. And that makes me very happy.
Absolutely, me too. And the bill just codifies what we already know constitutionally, that the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, those international organizations have absolutely no jurisdiction in Louisiana. And we are under no obligation to follow any of their protocols, their decrees, adopt any of their recommendations on anything. And it says specifically that no regulation fee, tax policy, mandate of any of those international organizations will be enforced or implemented in the state of Louisiana or any political subdivision of the state of Louisiana. It's a very, very clean, straight bill. The only concern that I have about it, Danielle, that we spoke about earlier, is that what happens if the Louisiana Department of Health or the Center for Disease Control or the National Institute of Health or the governor adopts the recommendations of the World Health Organization and then moves forward to impose those on the state of Louisiana? I think that it should be there should be an amendment in the bill that says before any health agency in Louisiana or federal health agency can make any recommendation binding on the citizens of Louisiana, it has to be ratified and approved by the legislature. Because if that doesn't happen, as you said earlier, our Louisiana Department of Health is a corrupt bureaucratic institution, leftist institution. So we're not obligated to adopt any recommendations from the WHO. But Louisiana Department of Health adopts
we want to anyway, right?
Exactly. The LDH, so they do it, and then we end up in the same place. So I loved your suggestion earlier, Danielle, that any health recommendation or health protocol from whatever source must be ratified by the legislature before it can be mandated on the citizens of Louisiana.
Yeah. You got to think around those corners because we've seen time and time again that our own state agencies have risen up against us and have not done us any favors. So that's what got us there. Chris, now to House Bill 714, and it is being brought by Representative Cruz. I'm very excited about this one. It is establishing gold and silver as currency in Louisiana. And I think, with the devaluation of the dollar, the instability of world economies, y'all know, everyone that listens knows that I'm a big fan of investing in gold and silver and making sure that you have a diversified portfolio. So this is very exciting to me. And Representative Cruz gave us a pretty interesting background story. Chris, do you want to share it?
Yeah, he got this. He was reading a book called Pirate Money, and by Kevin Freeman, and he came up with with the idea that we need to pass some legislation in Louisiana to reestablish gold and silver as a standard of currency because of the devaluation of the dollar and because of the abuse of the Federal Reserve System in our country, which is, the dollars as they're printed are not backed up by anything of real value. They're just pieces of paper. And so it's just amazing to me that we have a legislator who has the insight and the foresight to bring this legislation. I mean, gold and silver, once again, as a standard of currency in Louisiana, and it will apply the rule. It will establish the rules that will apply to that. Danielle, we need to have the lawyer for metal stacks on the show to talk about this legislation and how important it is. Because
I think they'd love to come on. I think they would. I'm not sure if maybe even one of the founders we can get to come on and share why this is important and, how the company is helping people protect their financial future. So I'm excited about this. Chris, I have this book, Pirate Money. Now, I have not read it yet. If anyone were to look at my bedside table, they would understand why there's a very large queue for reading material on my bedside table right now. But I think it's very interesting that the book Pirate Money was really inspired by this idea of protecting ourselves from government surveillance via CBDC. And the subtitle of the book is also pretty enlightening. And it says, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. And I think, Chris, as you said, that really points to the unconstitutionality of the Federal Reserve System. It points to the fact that our currencies are being manipulated by the people that we pay with our own tax dollars. And there is a State of Freedom listener who has shed some light on this and has done some great work in this area, and it's Dave Landry. So if you have any interest, he has a Substack where he's covered some of this. He's talked about inflation. He's talked about precious metals and a number of other things. And we'll drop the link to his Substack in the show notes because I think he'll probably be following this bill pretty closely too, Chris.
What a great guy, Dave Landry. And as he and I have discussed many times, the Federal Reserve Act was entirely unconstitutional. There's only one entity that is authorized under our Constitution to coin money and to establish the standard of weights and measures. And that is the U.S. Congress. And that is the Congress. And the Constitution does not allow the setting up of a private banking cabal to print money and control how much money is printed and control our economic system. And if you read the history of how all of that came about, it is stark and it is alarming. But I agree with you, Danielle. Dave Landry will be following this very, very closely. And I think he's going to be pretty excited about this legislation. This might actually get him down to the Capitol and to testify on this.
I hope it does. And Chris, another bill that's kind of in this realm as well is House Bill 357. It's by Representative Amade. It defines deposit accounts as not inclusive of any future CBDC, central bank digital currency. Yeah.
Right.
And a deposit account does not include CBDC at all. So she brought this bill last year. It passed both houses, if I recall, Chris. And
overwhelmingly.
Yeah. And the governor vetoed it because he wanted his big fat nose in our business, I guess.
I guess that's the reason. It doesn't surprise me that he did, but it passed overwhelmingly in both chambers in 2023, was vetoed by the governor. And then apparently between his veto and the veto override session, apparently he got to enough legislators, including enough Republican legislators, that we couldn't override the veto. But it's going to go through this time and be signed. And it says that central bank digital currency is not included within the definition of any deposit account at any bank. So keep that out of our state. We don't want this thinly camouflaged mechanism of economic surveillance over our lives, which is exactly what CBDC is. And Beryl Amade is smart enough to see that.
Yeah. And one other point on this, Chris, I believe, in our last conversation with our new treasurer, John Fleming, he's very much awake to this nonsense and to the just insidious nature of the federal government trying to get its claws further and further into our lives, into our pocketbooks, into our homes. And I think he would most likely be a strong supporter of this legislation, and perhaps Representative Cruz's as well.
I think so too, and I believe. Just for a second, I wanted to mention back on the gold and silver. Just for a second, Cruz's legislation that he has actually spoken to John Fleming, our current treasurer, who seems very open to this.
At least his office. Not sure about.
Yeah, the office seems very open to the legislation. They're supposed to be meeting this week to hash it out, but a lot of good indications on that one, and I believe that that Representative Amade's CBDC bill also is going to get through and pass, and we need them both.
Yep, we do. And the next topic up is elections, and there are a couple of bills that we're following under that rubric. The first one is Senate Bill 226, being brought by Senator Heather Cloud, and it is providing additional grounds for challenges to absentee voting, and that's something about if an affidavit flap is missing, then it can be challenged. Tell us about that.
Basically, this is saying that if any of you have to submit an affidavit, absentee voting, attesting to who you are. If there's any defect in your affidavit, even if it's just a technical defect, if it doesn't fully conform with the requirements of law, then the Secretary of State has the authority to reject that vote. And it is important because of the potential for fraud. So Senator Cloud here is simply trying to close out the loopholes that allow abuse in the absentee voting process. So if there's any defect or deficiency in your absentee affidavit, then the Secretary has authority to reject that ballot, and with notice, of course, to the voter.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that she's bringing this, Chris. Obviously, we are looking for far more overhaul type of legislation to reform our election system. But we're chipping away at election fraud with legislation like this, and it pays to be very precise in all of these matters. So I'm grateful that she's bringing it.
I'm very grateful that she's bringing it, and I'm also grateful, Danielle, for the next one that we're going to discuss, which I know that I couldn't wait for you to get to because I'm so excited about this. This is SB 182 from Senator Seabaugh. This is a great bill because right now, Danielle, in criminal cases, the only time the Attorney General can get involved in any criminal case or institute any criminal case is if a district attorney sends it up to him. The Attorney General has no criminal jurisdiction in any original jurisdiction in any criminal case. He has to have the case referred to him by a district attorney. But this legislation says that on any case involving a felony election offense, felony fraud, election fraud, that the Attorney General has what's called original jurisdiction to bring a criminal prosecution against anybody in that situation and does not have to wait on the DA. And it is so very important, especially with the Attorney General we have now, who I think will prosecute those cases.
Yeah. And Chris, does it preclude the DA from bringing the case themselves? Like, you just think about this being an extra measure of opportunity to prosecute felony election fraud, but maybe it doesn't really stop a DA from bringing something that they're aware of, right?
No, it absolutely does not. It doesn't divest the district attorney of jurisdiction. But unfortunately, Danielle, in Louisiana, there are times when district attorneys do not prosecute clear cases of election fraud for whatever reason. Maybe because they benefited on some level by the election fraud, or maybe it's the group of people committing election fraud are contributed to their campaigns. There's some politics involved more on the local level. So I think giving the attorney general, who's sort of a step beyond the reach there, a step removed, is going to be helpful to get these important cases prosecuted. And I think Liz Muriel will take this very seriously. This is not just a theoretical bill that Senator Seabaugh is passing, or that we're going to get passed. It's going to have some real practical implications in terms of how our election fraud cases are prosecuted in Louisiana.
And Chris, he's bringing this as a constitutional amendment, right?
You're right. It is a constitutional amendment. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, which means that 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate will vote to send it to the people. And if it passes in the legislature and goes to the people, it will be on November 5th. The citizens of Louisiana will vote to codify this in our Constitution. So if that happens, then the Constitution will provide that the Attorney General has the authority at that point independently to prosecute any case of felony election fraud or misconduct anywhere in Louisiana. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And another constitutional amendment, speaking of which, that is being brought is House Bill 111. It's being brought by new Representative Mike Bayham, who we endorsed. And it's about cleaning up governor term limits, which is, I think, really important.
Absolutely. And this is essentially, Danielle, going to do what the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution does, which basically provides that nobody can serve more than 2 terms as president of the United States. In other words, you can't serve 2 terms and then go away for a few years and then come back and run again. Right now in Louisiana, you can. So this constitutional amendment by Representative Bayham, as you said, will, if it passes, if the people pass it, the Constitution will provide that no governor in Louisiana can serve more than 2 terms. Period, no matter what. And I think it's important because I think 2 terms is enough. And I think I'm glad we have term limits in Louisiana for the legislature. I wish we had term limits for every U.S. congressman and every U.S. senator, but we'd be in a better position right now if we did. But I like this legislation, and hopefully it will pass and just limit the governor to 2 terms, period.
Yeah, I think, we've had enough experience with imperial governors over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So it's time to just tidy that up and let those servants move off into the sunset to have other profitable endeavors, if they so choose.
Exactly. Or not.
Or not.
Right.
Just go on. Just go on.
Please, just right. Move out.
All right. Last up for this is House Bill 90, Chris, and this is being brought by Representative Beau Bellew, and it is prohibiting the implementation of certain federal election directives and money unless approved by the legislature. And this one is really, I think, exciting and prescient.
It is, and I'm very, very excited. And prescient is the right word. I assure you, Representative Bellew is bringing this legislation in anticipation of possible draconian federal election decrees leading up to the 2024 presidential election, and trying to determine from on high how we vote, how we conduct our elections, and really what we do. And so this legislation will require approval by both houses of the state legislature before Louisiana will adopt any federal election recommendation whatsoever or accept any money from the federal government pertaining to our elections. I think it's really, really important that this be done in order to guard against what we know is coming, Danielle, and we know what's coming. Let's not make any bones about it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what's coming, but we know something's coming.
We don't know what's coming, but we anticipate that something's coming. And I think that this is a great, we've talked a good bit about preemptive legislation, you and I, on our show. This is a good example of preemptive legislation. We anticipate what may be coming, and we're setting up a framework whereby we can reject and challenge any act of the federal government pertaining to elections and how we conduct those elections in Louisiana if we so choose. We're going to be proactive, not reactive. And I applaud Representative Bellew for bringing this legislation.
Yes, me too. And Chris, that rounds out our 11 pieces of legislation for preview episode number 1. We will be getting these onto the LeCag website Action Center very shortly. So be on the lookout there. As you know, these all originate in committees. And so be on the lookout for calls to action to get in touch with committee members. And if you have not yet signed up for action alerts, please do that. It will help us out a lot, and you can weigh in on the issues that matter most to you, and we make it super simple for you.
Grassroots activism works, Danielle. People get on, sign up for our action alerts. It is so user-friendly, lecag.org, and then send those emails out. And it works. When legislators get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails from LeCag supporters or people across the state, it helps. It helps a lot. And we're just so thrilled to have the opportunity to do it. I'm so thankful for all also of our State of Freedom listeners and all the support that we have. And it's just, I'm so excited about having the opportunity to be a real resource for the citizens in the legislature and on the State of Freedom across the state as we continue to grow.
Yeah, it's such a blessing. And if people are looking for ways to support the State of Freedom or to drop us a line, let us know what legislation is important to you. You can do that at freedomstate.us. If you'd like to send us a gift by mail, you can do that at P.O. Box 861, Berg, B-O-U-R-G, Louisiana 70343. And back over at lecag.org, you can also support us there. You know that Chris will be front and center this week in the committee hearings, letting our perspective be known, letting your perspective be known as a citizen of the state of Louisiana. And we're so proud to be able to do that. So your support there at LeCag helps us so much to keep fighting for you, to keep being your ears and eyes and mouthpiece whenever you can't be there, and letting you know what's happening there as well back over here at the State of Freedom. And Chris, if people wanted to make a gift by mail to LeCag, how can they do that?
P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. And I want people to know, Danielle, when they become members of LeCag for $22 or $33 a month, or however much they want to do per month, or they send donations by mail, however they want to do it, they are helping to even the balance of power in the legislature and to make sure that the citizens' voice is heard there and heard very loudly and very clearly. If you feel like you've been ignored by your government, if you feel swallowed up and strangled by big corrupt special interest groups when your government is supposed to be representing you and hearing your voice, then we are your organization, and you can donate gladly and know that our fidelity is only to you and to the Constitution. And everything that you donate is deeply appreciated and goes to an incredible cause, which is returning our government to you.
Yeah, it is. And we're proud to be a part of it. We're proud to be fighting side by side with you to take back our freedoms, to take back our state sovereignty, to stake a claim for our own personal sovereignty. And we are just looking so much forward to seeing how much we can get accomplished this session.
And we will, with God's grace, with continued and growing support across the state, Danielle, and with focus and discipline every day. Each day, we will take another step to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen, Chris.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, lacag.org, or email chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.